In the quiet little suburb of Willow Creek, life was supposed to be peaceful. The streets were lined with neatly trimmed lawns, colorful flower beds, and rows of mailboxes that stood like tiny soldiers guarding each home's connection to the outside world. For Jason Miller, a software engineer who had recently moved into the neighborhood, this place seemed perfect. It was the kind of community where neighbors waved at each other in the mornings, kids rode their bikes on lazy afternoons, and everything felt just right. But Jason soon realized that not everything in Willow Creek was as picture-perfect as it appeared. Trouble began brewing almost immediately, and it all started with something as simple as a mailbox. It wasn't long after Jason settled in that he noticed his shiny new mailbox getting damaged, again and again. At first, he thought it might have been an accident or maybe some clumsy delivery driver brushing against it while dropping off packages. But when it happened for the third time, he knew something was off. Each time, the dents got worse, and replacing the mailbox was starting to cost him both money and patience. The real problem wasn't the mailbox itself. It was who kept hitting it. There was one neighbor in particular who always seemed to be involved whenever anything went wrong in the neighborhood. She was the type of person everyone secretly rolled their eyes at, a woman who took her role in the Homeowners Association, HOA, way too seriously. Let's call her Karen. Karen drove a big black SUV with vanity plates that read Roulez, and she strutted around the cul-de-sac like she owned the place. With oversized sunglasses perched on her nose and a clipboard perpetually tucked under her arm, Karen made sure everyone followed the HOA guidelines, even if no one asked her to. Jason quickly figured out that Karen lived in the house next door, which meant her driveway was dangerously close to his mailbox. Every single time she turned into her driveway, her car would clip the edge of his mailbox. At first, Jason tried giving her the benefit of the doubt. Maybe she couldn't see the mailbox properly. Or perhaps she was just a terrible driver. He even went out of his way to make things easier for her. He adjusted the position of the mailbox slightly, thinking it might help. But nothing worked. The hits kept coming, and so did Karen's excuses. One day, Jason decided enough was enough. He walked over to Karen's house, hoping to resolve the issue peacefully. When she opened the door, she looked surprised but quickly switched to her usual authoritative tone. "Yes?" she asked, raising an eyebrow behind her sunglasses. "Hi," Jason said politely. "I've noticed my mailbox keeps getting hit whenever you turn into your driveway. I was wondering if we could figure out a solution together." Karen crossed her arms and gave him a look that could freeze water. "Your mailbox is the problem," she declared without hesitation. "It's placed incorrectly according to HOA rules. You need to fix it." Jason blinked, taken aback. "Incorrectly? I installed it exactly where the guidelines say it should go." "Well, clearly you didn't read them correctly," Karen shot back, her voice dripping with condescension. Before Jason could respond, she shut the door in his face, leaving him standing there, frustrated and confused. Over the next few days, Jason did what any reasonable person would do. He double-checked the HOA guidelines. To his relief, he found that his mailbox was perfectly within the rules. Still, Karen refused to admit fault. Instead, she continued driving recklessly into her driveway, damaging his property as if it were somehow his responsibility to deal with it. Jason felt stuck. On one hand, he didn't want to escalate things further. It was just a mailbox after all. On the other hand, Karen's behavior was becoming unbearable. She didn't apologize, didn't offer to pay for repairs, and didn't show any signs of changing her ways. If anything, she seemed to take pleasure in asserting her dominance over him. That's when Jason had an idea. What if he could turn the tables on Karen? Not by fighting fire with fire, but by using his skills to teach her. A lesson she wouldn't forget anytime soon. Jason spent hours brainstorming, sketching designs, and researching materials. He wanted to create something that looked ordinary on the outside, but was anything but weak on the inside. Something that would stand its ground, and force Karen to face the consequences of her actions. And thus the plan began to take shape. Little did Karen know, her days of terrorizing Jason and his poor mailbox were numbered. Jason knew he couldn't just sit back and let Karen keep destroying his property. He needed a solution, something clever, something unexpected. But what could he do? Filing complaints with the HOA wouldn't work. Karen practically ran the organization. Calling the cops seemed too extreme for a mailbox issue. No, this called for a different approach, an approach that combined creativity, engineering, and maybe just a little bit of mischief. After days of brainstorming, Jason came up with an idea so ridiculous it might actually work. He would build a fake mailbox. Not just any fake mailbox, though. This one would look completely normal on the outside like every other wooden mailbox in the neighborhood. But inside, it would be reinforced with titanium alloy, making it nearly indestructible. If Karen hit it again, and Jason was sure she would, her SUV would take the brunt of the damage, not his mailbox. The more Jason thought about it, the more excited he got. It wasn't about revenge or causing harm. It was about proving a point. Karen had been reckless and unapologetic, and Jason wanted to show her exactly what happened when you didn't own up to your mistakes. Plus, he figured it would make for one heck of a story to tell at the next neighborhood barbecue, if things went according to plan. With his mind made up, Jason dove headfirst into the project. He spent hours scouring the internet for tutorials on welding, metalworking, and DIY construction. He ordered sheets of thin titanium online, along with sturdy wooden planks and reflective numbers to match the HOA's strict aesthetic standards. His garage became a makeshift workshop, filled with tools, spare parts, and half-finished prototypes. Neighbors passing by couldn't help but notice the unusual activity. Some stopped to ask questions, curious about what Jason was building. He simply smiled and shrugged, saying it was a little experiment. As the days turned into weeks, Jason poured all his free time into perfecting the design. He wanted the mailbox to look authentic enough to fool anyone, even someone as sharp-eyed as Karen. The outer shell was crafted from weathered wood, carefully sanded and painted white to blend seamlessly with the others on the street. Inside, however, lay the secret weapon. Layers of titanium plates bolted securely into place. Jason tested the structure repeatedly, hitting it with hammers, dropping weights onto it, and even backing his own car into it. Slowly, of course. Each test confirmed what he already suspected. The mailbox wasn't going anywhere. But Jason didn't stop there. Knowing how important evidence would be if things escalated, he installed a discreet security camera on his porch. Positioned perfectly, to capture the driveway and the mailbox, the camera recorded 24/7. Jason reviewed the footage daily, documenting every time Karen's SUV clipped the old mailbox. These clips would serve as proof, not just of the damage she caused, but of her blatant disregard for her neighbor's property. Word of Jason's mysterious project began to spread around Willow Creek. A few neighbors joked that he must be building a robot or some kind of high-tech gadget. Others speculated that he was preparing for a zombie apocalypse. Jason laughed off their theories, keeping the true purpose of his creation a closely guarded secret. Deep down, though, he couldn't wait to see the look on Karen's face when she finally met her match. By the time the mailbox was complete, Jason felt a mix of nerves and excitement. He carried it outside and planted it firmly in the ground, double-checking its alignment and stability. From a distance, it looked no different than the original. Up close, though, it had a subtle gleam, a hint of the strength hidden beneath its unassuming exterior. Jason stepped back to admire his handiwork, feeling a sense of satisfaction wash over him. The trap was set. All that was left now was to wait. And wait he did. Jason sat by his window that evening, nursing a cup of coffee and watching the street, like a hawk. He knew Karen's routine by heart. She usually came home late, speeding down the cul-de-sac as if she were auditioning for a Fast and Furious movie. Sure enough, just before sunset, he heard the familiar rumble of her SUV approaching. His heart raced as he grabbed his phone, ready to record whatever happened next. Karen didn't disappoint. She barreled down the street, barely slowing down, as she swung wide into her driveway. There was a loud bang as her bumper collided with the titanium-reinforced mailbox. For a moment, everything went silent. Then came the unmistakable sound of twisting metal as her car lurched forward, leaving, behind a crumpled mess where her front bumper used to be. Jason couldn't believe it. It had worked. His plan had actually worked. He replayed the scene in his mind, marveling at how perfectly everything had fallen into place. But this was only the beginning. Now came the hard part, confronting Karen and showing her, and the rest of the neighborhood, exactly what she had done. The sound of Karen's SUV colliding with the titanium-reinforced mailbox echoed through the quiet neighborhood like a thunderclap. For a split second, everything froze. Jason held his breath, waiting to see how the scene would unfold. He peeked, out from behind his curtains, phone in hand, recording every moment as Karen stepped out of her car. Her face was a mix of shock and fury. Her oversized sunglasses perched precariously on her nose as she surveyed the damage. "What the?" Karen muttered under her breath, her voice rising as she approached the mailbox. She bent down to inspect, it running her fingers along its surface. To anyone else, it looked perfectly normal, a plain wooden box sitting innocently by the curb. But Jason knew better. Beneath that unassuming exterior lay layers of titanium alloy, designed to withstand even the harshest impacts. And now, thanks to Karen's reckless driving, her shiny black SUV was sporting a crumpled bumper that sagged pitifully against the ground. Karen straightened up, her cheeks flushed red with anger. "This is ridiculous," she shouted, loud enough for the entire cul-de-sac to hear. "Who puts a mailbox here? This is completely unsafe." Jason couldn't help but chuckle quietly to himself. Unsafe? The irony was almost too much to bear. He had spent weeks meticulously crafting this mailbox to be as safe and indestructible as possible. Meanwhile, Karen had been barreling into her driveway like a runaway train, leaving a trail of destruction in her wake. Now standing there with her hands on her hips, she had the audacity to call his property unsafe. Unable to resist any longer, Jason grabbed his phone and walked outside, trying his best to keep a straight face. As he strolled casually toward the scene of the crime, he could see Karen pacing back and forth, muttering angrily to herself. When she noticed him approaching, she spun around, pointing an accusatory finger at the mailbox. "Did you see what happened?" she demanded, her voice shrill. "This thing is dangerous. Someone could get hurt." "Oh, I saw," Jason replied, calmly holding up his phone. "In fact, I've got it all on video." Karen's eyes narrowed suspiciously. "What are you talking about?" Jason tapped the screen of his phone, rewinding the footage to the exact moment when Karen's SUV slammed into the mailbox. He turned the volume up just loud enough for her to hear the unmistakable crunch of metal meeting metal. Karen's jaw dropped as she watched herself drive recklessly into the driveway, only to collide with the mailbox seconds later. Her face turned pale, then red again as reality sank in. "That's not fair," she sputtered, snatching the phone out of Jason's hand. "You can't just record people without their permission." "I didn't need your permission," Jason said, keeping his tone light but firm. "This is my property and you've been damaging it for weeks. I think I have a right to document what's happening." Karen opened her mouth to argue, but quickly closed it again, clearly flustered. She handed the phone back to Jason, avoiding eye contact as she paced nervously. "Fine," she snapped, "but this still doesn't prove anything. Maybe your mailbox is defective. Ever think of that?" Jason raised an eyebrow, amused by her desperation. "Defective? Really? Let me show you something." He reached out and gave the mailbox a solid tap with his knuckles. The sound rang out clear and metallic, unlike the dull thud you'd expect from a regular wooden mailbox. Karen stared at it, her expression shifting from confusion to disbelief. "This isn't normal," she muttered, circling the mailbox like a detective searching for clues. "What did you do to it?" "I reinforced it," Jason admitted, crossing his arms. "After replacing my mailbox 3 times because of your accidents, I figured it was time to try something stronger. Turns out titanium works wonders." Karen's mouth dropped open, but no words came out. She looked like she'd been caught red-handed, which, in a way, she had. Still, she wasn't ready to admit defeat just yet. Instead, she switched tactics, attempting to deflect blame onto Jason. "You're the one who put this thing here," she exclaimed, gesturing wildly at the mailbox. "If you hadn't messed with it, None of this would have happened. Jason sighed, shaking his head. Karen, let's be honest. You've been hitting my mailbox since the day I moved in. I've replaced it twice already, and each time you refused to take responsibility. Did you really think I was going to sit back and let you keep destroying my property? For once, Karen didn't have a quick comeback. She glanced around nervously as if hoping someone would step in to defend her. But the street was eerily quiet, save for the distant chirping of birds. Even the nosy neighbors who usually loved to gossip were nowhere to be seen. It was just Jason and Karen, standing face to face in front of the indestructible mailbox. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Karen threw up her hands in frustration. Fine, whatever, but don't expect me to pay for any of this, she declared, gesturing vaguely at her damaged bumper. Without another word, she stomped back to her house, slamming the door behind her with such force that the windows rattled. Jason stood there for a moment, watching her retreat. He felt a strange mix of satisfaction and relief wash over him. The plan had worked exactly as intended. Not only had he proven Karen's recklessness, but he'd also forced her to confront the consequences of her actions. Still, he knew this wasn't the end. Karen wasn't the type to let things go easily, and he braced himself for whatever drama might come next. As he turned to head back inside, Jason noticed a small crowd gathering at the edge of the cul-de-sac. Neighbors who had been watching from their windows or porches now ventured closer, eager to see what all the commotion was about. Some wore expressions of concern, while others seemed downright entertained. One older man tipped his hat approvingly as he passed by, whispering, "Good job, son." About time someone stood up to her. Jason smiled, feeling a renewed sense of camaraderie with his neighbors. For so long, Karen had ruled the neighborhood with an iron fist, intimidating anyone who dared challenge her authority. But today, she had met her match and everyone knew it. Still, Jason couldn't shake the feeling that Karen wouldn't give up without a fight. He returned to his house, locking the door behind him, and pulled up the security footage on his laptop. Just in case she tried to deny everything later, he wanted to make sure he had plenty of evidence to back up his side of the story. After all, this was Willow Creek, where appearances mattered more than anything, and proving your point was half the battle. The next morning, word of the mailbox incident spread faster than wildfire through Willow Creek. Neighbors who had been too shy or too intimidated to speak up before were suddenly buzzing with excitement. By the time Jason stepped outside to grab his newspaper, a small crowd had already gathered near his driveway. People whispered among themselves, pointing at the titanium-reinforced mailbox and exchanging theories about what had happened. "Did you hear about Karen's car?" one woman asked her friend, barely containing her laughter. "Her bumper looks like it went through a shredder." "I heard she hit it so hard the mailbox didn't even budge," another neighbor chimed in, shaking his head in disbelief. I mean, how does that even happen?" Jason couldn't help but smile as he listened to the chatter. It felt good to know that for once, Karen wasn't the center of attention because of her self-righteous lectures or nitpicking complaints. This time, she was the talk of the town for all the wrong reasons, and judging by the amused expressions on everyone's faces, no one seemed particularly upset about it. As Jason made his way toward the group, several neighbors greeted him warmly, patting him on the back or offering words of encouragement. One older man whom Jason recognized as a retired mechanic gave him a knowing nod. "You've got guts, kid," he said with a grin. "Nobody's dared to stand up to Karen in years." "Thanks," Jason replied, scratching the back of his neck awkwardly. He hadn't expected this kind of reaction from his neighbors. Sure, he'd hoped to teach Karen a lesson, but he never imagined his little project would turn into a neighborhood spectacle. Meanwhile, Karen stayed holed up inside her house, avoiding eye contact with anyone who dared glance in her direction. Her SUV remained parked in the driveway, its crumpled bumper serving as a silent testament to the previous night's events. Every now and then, Jason caught a glimpse of her peeking out from behind her curtains, her face pale and drawn. She looked less like the fearless HOA enforcer everyone knew, and more like someone who had just been caught red-handed doing something they weren't proud of. But Karen wasn't about to let things slide without putting up a fight. By mid-afternoon, she re-emerged, marching straight to Jason's front door with a determined look on her face. When he opened the door, She wasted no time getting to the point. "This isn't over," she snapped, jabbing a finger at him. "I'm filing a formal complaint with the HOA board. You deliberately sabotaged my property and I won't tolerate it." Jason raised an eyebrow, unimpressed by her theatrics. "Sabotage? Really? Last I checked, you're the one who drove into my mailbox. 3 times, might I add." Karen ignored his comment, pulling out a folder stuffed with papers. "I've documented everything," she announced smugly, waving the documents in front of him. "Your mailbox is clearly a hazard. It violates multiple HOA guidelines, and I'll make sure the board takes action against you." Jason crossed, his arms leaning casually against the doorframe. "Go ahead, file your complaint. But before you do, maybe you should take another look at these." He pulled out his phone and played the video footage of Karen hitting the mailbox, not just once but multiple times over the past few weeks. Each clip showed her driving recklessly into her driveway, completely oblivious to the damage she was causing. Karen's confident smirk faltered as she watched the videos. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached out to grab the phone, but Jason held it out of reach. "Don't worry," he said calmly. "I'll send copies of this to the HOA board along with photos of my previous mailboxes. Oh, and let's not forget the timestamps. They match perfectly with when you came home every single time." For a moment, Karen stood frozen, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Then, realizing she had no comeback, she snatched her folder and stormed off, muttering under her breath about unfair treatment and neighborly respect. Jason watched her go, feeling a mix of satisfaction and pity. As much as Karen annoyed him, he couldn't deny that part of him felt sorry for her. She had spent so long trying to control everyone around her, dictating what colors people could paint their houses or how high their hedges could grow. Now, faced with undeniable proof of her own mistakes, she had nowhere to hide. Over the next few days, the drama unfolded exactly as Jason predicted. Karen submitted her formal complaint to the HOA board, accusing him of installing a dangerous and non-compliant mailbox. But instead of siding with her, the board members found themselves torn between loyalty to Karen and the overwhelming evidence Jason provided. After reviewing the security footage, photos, and timestamps, they ultimately ruled in Jason's favor, citing Karen's repeated negligence as the root cause of the issue. To add insult to injury, the board issued Karen a warning for reckless driving within the neighborhood, a first in Willow Creek's history. For someone who prided herself on enforcing rules, being called out for breaking them was nothing short of humiliating. News of the ruling quickly spread throughout the community, sparking even more conversations among the neighbors. Some joked that Karen's vanity plates should be changed from rules to loser. Others admitted they were relieved to see her finally get taken down a peg. Even the usually reserved HOA president, a soft-spoken man in his 60s, couldn't resist cracking a smile during the next meeting. "You know," he said during a break in the agenda, "it's funny how sometimes the simplest things, like a mailbox, can bring a whole neighborhood together." His comment earned a round of chuckles from the attendees, including Jason, who couldn't agree more. What started as a personal vendetta had turned into something bigger, a reminder that standing up for yourself and your community could inspire others to do the same. Still, Jason knew better than to gloat. While Karen's behavior had earned her plenty of ridicule, he understood that holding on to grudges wouldn't solve anything. Instead, he focused on moving forward, repairing any lingering tension with his neighbors and making sure everyone felt comfortable speaking up if issues arose in the future. As for Karen, she kept mostly to herself after that, rarely venturing outside except to drive her newly repaired SUV to work. Without her constant interference, life in Willow Creek became noticeably quieter and happier. The once feared HOA enforcer had been humbled, and her reign of terror officially came to an end. Jason often thought about dismantling the titanium mailbox and replacing it with something simpler. But every time he considered it, he remembered the lesson it taught, not just to Karen but to everyone in the neighborhood. Sometimes, standing your ground required creativity, patience, and a little bit of engineering brilliance. And sometimes, justice came wrapped in the form of an indestructible mailbox. Life in Willow Creek slowly returned to its usual rhythm, but with one major difference. Karen's influence over the neighborhood had all but disappeared. The woman who once ruled the cul-de-sac with an iron fist now kept to herself, rarely venturing outside except for essential errands. Her SUV, freshly repaired and sporting a new bumper, sat quietly in her driveway, almost as if it too wanted nothing to do with the drama that had unfolded. For Jason, things felt lighter somehow. He no longer woke up dreading the sound of screeching tires or worrying about finding another dent in his mailbox. Instead, he noticed subtle changes in the neighborhood, a renewed sense of camaraderie among the neighbors, more smiles exchanged during morning walks, and even impromptu gatherings on weekends. It was as though Karen's fall from grace had given everyone permission to breathe easier, to let go of the tension she had unknowingly created. One Saturday afternoon, Jason decided it was finally time to replace the titanium mailbox with something simpler. As much as he admired its indestructible design and the role it played in teaching Karen a lesson, he knew it didn't belong there anymore. The battle was over, and keeping it around would only serve as a constant reminder of conflict rather than resolution. He walked into his garage, pulling out a plain wooden mailbox he'd purchased earlier in the week. It wasn't flashy or reinforced with metal plates. It was just an ordinary mailbox, painted white and adorned with reflective numbers per HOA guidelines. Perfectly compliant, perfectly boring. Exactly what Willow Creek needed right now. As he planted it firmly in the ground, where the titanium mailbox had stood, a few neighbors stopped by to watch. One of them, a middle-aged man named Bob who lived across the street, leaned against his fence and grinned. "So, this is the end of the legendary mailbox saga?" Bob asked, raising an eyebrow. "I gotta say, I'm gonna miss seeing that thing take down Karen's bumper." Jason laughed, brushing dirt off his hands. "Yeah, well, I figured it was time to move on. Besides, I don't think we'll have any more trouble with reckless drivers anytime soon." Bob nodded thoughtfully, glancing toward Karen's house. "You know, people are still talking about what happened. Some folks think you're some kind of genius for pulling that off. Others just can't believe Karen actually got called out. Like that." "It wasn't about calling her out," Jason replied, shaking his head. "It was about standing up for myself and showing her that actions have consequences. Honestly, I hope she learns from this instead of holding on to resentment." Bob chuckled, tipping his baseball cap. "Good luck with that. But hey, either way, you've earned yourself a solid reputation around here. People respect you for handling it the way you did." The conversation lingered in Jason's mind long after Bob wandered back to his yard. Respect, that was something he hadn't expected to gain from this whole ordeal. When he first moved to Willow Creek, he saw himself as just another face in the crowd, someone trying to blend in and avoid making waves. But now he realized that standing up for what was right, even when it meant going toe-to-toe with someone as intimidating as Karen, could inspire others to do the same. Over the next few weeks, Jason noticed small but meaningful shifts in the neighborhood dynamic. Neighbors who had previously avoided confrontation began speaking up when issues arose, whether it was addressing parking disputes or suggesting updates to the HOA guidelines. Even the board meetings, which used to be dominated by Karen's loud opinions, became more collaborative and inclusive. For the first time in years, Willow Creek felt like a true community, a place where people looked out for each other instead of tiptoeing around egos. Karen, meanwhile, seemed to retreat further into her shell. She eventually put her house on the market, citing personal reasons for leaving the neighborhood. No one pressed her for details, but rumors circulated that she planned to move closer to family, or maybe just somewhere where her reputation hadn't been tarnished quite so publicly. Either way, her departure marked the official end of an era in Willow Creek. On the day Karen's moving truck rolled away, Jason couldn't help but feel a twinge of sadness. Despite everything, he didn't hate her. In fact, part of him hoped she'd find peace wherever she went. After all, everyone made mistakes, even Karen. What mattered most was learning from them and growing as a person. With Karen gone, life in Willow Creek settled into a comfortable routine. Kids played freely in the streets, dogs barked happily, From their yards and mailboxes stood proudly along the curb, untouched by reckless drivers. Jason often found himself reflecting on how far the neighborhood had come since he first arrived. What started as a simple property dispute had turned into a catalyst for change, bringing people together in ways he never anticipated. At the annual block party later that summer, Jason found himself surrounded by neighbors eager to thank him for standing up to Karen. Someone handed him a cold drink while another patted him on the back, saying, "We owe you one, buddy." He smiled humbly, deflecting the praise as best he could. "It wasn't just me," he said, looking around at the friendly faces gathered under twinkling string lights. "Everyone stepped up when it mattered. That's what makes a neighborhood strong." His words were met with cheers and applause, but deep down, Jason knew the real victory wasn't about defeating Karen. It was about proving that kindness, courage, and a little ingenuity could overcome even the toughest challenges. And as he raised his glass in a toast to the future of Willow Creek, he couldn't help but feel proud of the role he'd played in shaping it. The titanium mailbox may have been gone, but its legacy lived on. In the stories shared at parties, in the newfound unity among neighbors, and in the quiet confidence of a man who learned that sometimes standing your ground could change the world around you.